The blood-red sunset blazed across Olivia Fletcher's face as she stood with her back against the barn. A letter clutched in her trembling hands. The bank would foreclose on her farm in 30 days, unless she could miraculously produce the money her late husband had promised. Thunder rumbled in the distance, matching the storm brewing inside her heart as she stared out at the withering crops and weathered fences of what was once a thriving homestead. Tascosa, Texas, 1885, was unforgiving to most, but especially to widows. At 26, Olivia had spent the past 3 months since Robert's passing trying to keep their small farm alive, but drought and debt were relentless enemies. Her blonde hair, once neatly pinned, now fell in disheveled strands around her face as she slid down against the rough wooden wall and allowed herself a rare moment of despair. "No," she whispered, wiping away a tear with the back of her hand. "I will not lose this place. I promised Robert." The promise felt hollow now. Robert Fletcher had been a good man but a poor planner. His sudden death from pneumonia had left her with more questions than answers, and the revelation of their dire financial situation had come as a shock. The 60 acres of land, the modest farmhouse, the small herd of cattle, and the struggling crops were all she had left of their 8 years of marriage. Morning came with a vengeance. The Texas sun already blazing by 7 as Olivia attempted to mend a broken fence. Her hands were blistered and raw, unused to the heavy labor that had been Robert's domain. She dismissed their last farmhand weeks ago, unable to pay his wages. Now it was just her, fighting a losing battle against time and nature. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her straighten, shield her eyes against the sun. A rider was approaching down the dusty road leading to her property. Visitors were rare in this remote stretch of land outside Tascosa, and uninvited ones even rarer. The stranger rode tall in the saddle, his black hat pulled low over his face. As he drew closer, she could make out a lean, weathered frame and the practiced ease of a man who'd spent most of his life on horseback. Her hand instinctively moved toward the shotgun leaning against the fence post. "That's close enough, stranger," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The rider reined his horse to a stop, raising one hand in a peaceful gesture while keeping the other visible on his saddle horn. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat back to reveal a face younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of stormy skies. "Name's Quentin Tucker. I'm looking for work." Olivia almost laughed at the absurdity. "I'm afraid you've wasted your time, Mr. Tucker. I can barely keep myself fed, let alone hire help." His eyes swept over the property, taking in the broken fences, the untended fields, the peeling paint on the farmhouse, and then returned to her face. "Seems to me you could use an extra pair of hands whether you can pay or not," he said simply. "And why would you work for nothing?" Suspicion edged her voice. "Didn't say I'd work for nothing." He dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs jangling softly. "Room and board would do for now. Been riding hard for 3 weeks, and my horse and I could use a rest." Olivia studied him, noting the quality of his worn but well-cared-for clothing, the Colt revolver holstered at his hip, the way he stood alert but not threatening. He didn't have the desperate look of a drifter or the dangerous air of an outlaw. Still, caution had kept her alive this long. "What brings you to these parts, Mr. Tucker?" Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or memory. "Just passing through, heading west." "And what were you before you decided to pass through?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Curious, aren't you, madam? I've been many things. Cowboy mostly. Worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas. Did some ranch work. Fought in a war I'd rather forget." The mention of the war, undoubtedly the Civil War that had torn the country apart 20 years prior, gave her pause. Many men still carried those scars, visible and invisible. "I don't need charity, Mr. Tucker. And I'm not offering any. I'm offering fair trade labor for shelter." He gestured toward the broken fence. "That post is set too shallow. It'll come down again with the first strong wind." Irritation flashed through her. "I'm aware of that. I was just about to, no disrespect intended, madam, just pointing out that I know farm work. And from the look of things, you could use someone who does." The truth of his words stung. She glanced back at the farmhouse, thinking of the foreclosure notice. Pride warred with practicality in her mind. "1 week," she finally said. "You can stay 1 week. We'll see after that." He nodded once, no triumph in his expression. "Fair enough, and you are Mrs. Fletcher, Olivia Fletcher, widow?" he asked quietly. She stiffened. "Yes, 3 months now, my condolences." The words were simple, but something in his tone suggested he understood loss in a way most platitudes did not. "The barn has a small room. It's not much, but it's dry. You can put your horse in the corral." She hesitated. "Supper's at sundown." Quentin Tucker nodded again, took his horse's reins, and led the animal toward the barn without another word. Olivia watched him go, unsure if she just made a terrible mistake or found the answer to her prayers. By sundown, Olivia had to admit that Quentin Tucker knew what he was doing. He'd fixed the fence properly, examined the rest of the property with a critical eye, and begun repairs on a leaky water trough, all without direction or supervision. Now he sat across from her at the small kitchen table, his hat hung on a peg by the door, his manner respectful as he ate the simple stew she'd prepared. "This farm has good bones, Mrs. Fletcher," he said after a while, "but it needs attention." "My husband died unexpectedly," she replied, a defensive edge to her voice. "I've done what I can. I wasn't criticizing you." His eyes met hers steadily. "Just stating facts. What did your husband farm here?" "We have had a small herd of cattle, about 30 head now, some crops for our own use." Robert was trying to expand into breeding horses before he. She trailed off. "Good cattle country," Quentin nodded, "though the drought's been hard this year." "It has." She hesitated, then decided that if he was staying, even temporarily, he should know the truth. "The bank's foreclosing in 30 days unless I can make payment." He paused mid-bite, his expression unchanging. "How much?" $200, he whistled softly. "That's a fair sum." "It's impossible," she admitted. "I've tried everything." "The cattle aren't worth half that in this market and with the drought." She shook her head. "I suppose I should be looking for somewhere else to go." "Don't give up just yet, Mrs. Fletcher." He continued, eating calmly. "A lot can happen in 30 days." Olivia wanted to ask what he meant by that, but something in his demeanor discouraged further questions. Instead, she changed the subject. "You said you're heading west." "Where to?" "California, maybe. Heard there are opportunities there." "Seems everyone's chasing opportunity somewhere else these days." "And you? What keeps you here fighting for this place?" The question caught her off guard. Most people assumed they knew why a widow would cling to her husband's property: sentiment, security, lack of alternatives. Few asked. "This land is the first thing that was ever truly mine," she answered honestly. "Robert and I built this place from nothing. Every fence post, every acre cleared, we did it together. It's not just his legacy I'm trying to save. It's mine too." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Then we'd better get to work saving it." The "we" didn't escape her notice, but she chose not to comment on it. 1 week, she reminded herself. He'd be gone after that, and she'd be facing her problems alone again. Dawn broke clear and cool the next morning. Olivia rose early as always, but was surprised to find Quentin already up, coffee brewing on the stove. "Hope you don't mind," he said, nodding toward the pot. "Thought we could use an early start. We got a lot to do if we're going to turn this place around." He poured her a cup, handed it to her. "I checked your cattle at first light. They're underfed but healthy enough. Your bull is a good one, Spanish bloodlines from the look of him. Robert was proud of that bull, paid more than we could afford for him. Smart investment, though. With the right care, you could have a valuable herd in a few years." "I don't have a few years, Mr. Tucker. I have less than a month." He nodded thoughtfully. "First things first, then. We need to get your fences secure and check your water sources. No point planning long-term if the cattle stray or die of thirst." The day passed in a blur of hard work. Quentin moved with the efficiency of someone who'd spent his life on ranches, anticipating needs before Olivia voiced them. By midday, they'd repaired most of the north pasture fencing. By sunset, he'd cleared a blocked spring that fed into the cattle's water source. The next morning, they rode out together to check on the scattered herd. Olivia was a competent rider, a necessity for any woman living in this part of Texas, but she admired the way Quentin sat his horse, as though man and animal were a single unit. "Your husband must have been a good rancher," Quentin commented as they guided their horses across a shallow creek. "He chose good grazing land. The soil's rich here despite the drought." "He was learning," Olivia admitted. "We both were. We came from back east originally. Robert had romantic notions about ranching in Texas." "Nothing romantic about it," Quentin said with a hint of amusement. "Just hard work and harder luck most times. That's what we discovered." She smiled faintly at the memory. "Our first winter here we nearly froze to death. Neither of us had any idea how cold it could get. Robert rode 15 miles to borrow enough firewood to see us through until spring. Man must have loved you a great deal to bring you out here." "He did." Her voice softened. "And I loved him enough to stay, even when things were at their hardest." Quentin's eyes met hers briefly, then returned to scanning the horizon. "That's rare, Mrs. Fletcher. Most people run when things get hard. And you, Mr. Tucker, are you a runner?" The question hung between them for a moment. "I've done my share of running," he finally admitted, "and my share of staying too long where I shouldn't." Before she could ask what he meant, he pointed toward a rise about half a mile away. "There's part of your herd. Let's go check on them." The cattle were indeed thin but healthy enough to survive with proper care. As they rode back toward the farmhouse, Olivia found herself studying her unexpected helper. There was something about Quentin Tucker that didn't quite fit the mold of a drifting cowboy. His speech was educated when he chose it to be, his manners refined beneath the rough exterior. And there was a watchfulness about him, an awareness that spoke of a man accustomed to danger. "You're staring, Mrs. Fletcher," he said without looking at her. Heat rose to her cheeks. "I was wondering what your story is, Mr. Tucker. The real one, not the vague answers you've given me." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Finally, he said, "My story isn't particularly interesting or unique. I fought in a war that taught me to value peace. I've worked hard and made my share of mistakes. Recently, I decided it was time for a change of scenery." "That tells me nothing at all." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It tells you I prefer privacy, Mrs. Fletcher. Fair enough." She nudged her horse to a slightly faster pace. "As long as your privacy doesn't bring trouble to my door." "It won't," he assured her. Something in his tone made her believe him. The days fell into a rhythm. Each morning, they would rise early and tackle the most pressing repairs. Quentin proved to be skilled with both livestock and carpentry, and under his careful attention, the farm began to show signs of recovery. He fixed the sagging front porch, reinforced the barn roof, and repaired the windmill that had been broken for months. By the end of the first week, Olivia didn't even consider asking him to leave. The arrangement continued unspoken. He worked from dawn till dusk. She provided meals and the small room in the barn, and slowly, the overwhelming hopelessness that had gripped her began to recede. It was during the second week that Tom Matthews, the banker from Tascosa, rode out to the farm. Olivia was in the garden when she spotted his buggy approaching, and her stomach knotted with dread. "Mr. Matthews," she greeted him with forced politeness as he climbed down from his vehicle. "This is unexpected." "Mrs. Fletcher," he nodded curtly. Matthews was a thin man with cold eyes and a perpetual frown. "I was passing by and thought I'd check on your situation." "My situation is unchanged," she replied evenly. "I still have more than 2 weeks before the deadline." "Yes, well." His eyes traveled past her to where Quentin was mending a corral gate. "I see you've hired help. Interesting financial decision given your circumstances." Before she could respond, Quentin approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Problem here, Mrs. Fletcher." "No problem," Matthews answered before she could. "Just checking on the bank's investment." He extended a hand. "Tom Matthews, First Bank of Tascosa." Quentin nodded but didn't take the offered hand. "Quentin Tucker, and it's not an investment if you're planning to take it away." Matthews' face tightened. "Business is business, Mr. Tucker. Mrs. Fletcher's husband took out a loan that needs to be repaid." "And it will be," Quentin said calmly. Olivia shot him a warning look. "Mr. Tucker is helping me temporarily, Mr. Matthews. He's not involved in my financial affairs." "I see." The banker's gaze shifted between them. "Well, I merely wanted to remind you that the deadline stands firm. $200 by the 15th or foreclosure proceedings begin." He climbed back into his buggy. "Good day, Mrs. Fletcher." They watched in silence as he drove away. Once he was out of earshot, Olivia turned to Quentin, anger flashing in her eyes. "What were you thinking, making promises I can't keep? I don't have $200 and I won't in 2 weeks. "I didn't promise anything," he replied calmly. "I just stated a fact. The loan will be repaid." "How? Do you have $200 hidden in your saddlebags?" The sarcasm in her voice was sharp. "Not exactly." He held her gaze steadily. "But I might have a way to get it. There's a horse auction in San Antonio next week. Good prices for quality stock. In case you haven't noticed, I don't have quality stock to sell. My horses are work animals, not auction material." "No, but I know horses. And I know a man in Tascosa who has a fine stallion he might be willing to part with for the right trade." Olivia stared at him. "What could I possibly trade? Not you, me." He nodded toward his own horse, a magnificent bay stallion that had drawn her admiration from the first day. "Eclipse, there is worth something to the right buyer. You'd sell your horse to help me save this farm." Disbelief colored her voice. "Why would you do that?" For the first time since she'd met him, Quentin Tucker looked uncomfortable. "Let's just say I've been on the wrong end of bankers like Matthews before. Besides," he added with a faint smile, "I've put too much work into this place to see it go to waste." She studied him for a long moment. "I can't let you do that. You can't stop me either." His tone was light but final. "I'll ride into town tomorrow, see about making arrangements." True to his word, Quentin rode to Tascosa the next morning. Olivia spent the day in a state of anxious anticipation, unable to focus on her chores as she wondered what his plan entailed and why this stranger was willing to go to such lengths for her. When he returned in the late afternoon, his expression gave nothing away. "Well?" she demanded as he unsaddled his horse. "Well," he echoed, "I've got good news and complicated news. Start with the good. I found a buyer for Eclipse. He's willing to pay $150. Her heart sank. "That's still 50 short. That's where the complicated part comes in." He led his horse into the corral before continuing. Sam Wilson over at the livery stable has a chestnut stallion with bloodlines that would fetch at least 100 at the San Antonio auction. He's willing to trade it for your bull and 2 of your best cows. But without the bull, I can't breed my herd. Not right away, no. But with the money from selling both horses, you'd clear your debt and have enough left to buy a younger bull next season, one that might even improve your herd. Olivia leaned against the corral fence, her mind racing. It's a gamble. Life's a gamble, Mrs. Fletcher. His eyes met hers. But sometimes you have to risk what you have to get what you need. And what do you get out of this, Mr. Tucker? You lose your horse and still end up with nothing. A shadow passed across his face. I get to see that smug banker get less than he hoped for, and he hesitated. I get the satisfaction of knowing I helped someone who deserves it. That night, Olivia lay awake long after she should have been sleeping. Quentin Tucker was an enigma, a man willing to sacrifice his most valuable possession for a virtual stranger, yet unwilling to share his own past. Part of her warned that no one did something for nothing, that there must be an ulterior motive she couldn't see. Yet another part, a part she'd thought died with Robert, wanted to trust this quiet, capable man who had brought hope back to her world. The next day, they drove the bull and 2 cows into town, returning with the chestnut stallion Sam Wilson had promised. It was indeed a fine animal with a proud bearing and intelligent eyes. He's a beauty, Olivia admitted as they led him into the corral. He'll fetch a good price, Quentin agreed. We should leave for San Antonio tomorrow if we want to make the auction. You'll need to sign the bill of sale, and it's a 3-day journey each way. Not safe for a woman alone. She wanted to argue that she could handle herself, but the practicality of his words stopped her. What about the farm? Your neighbor Miller agreed to check on things while we're gone. I spoke to him yesterday. At her surprised look, he added, I take it you 2 aren't on friendly terms. Joseph Miller has been trying to buy this land since we moved here, Olivia explained. He's not happy having a small, independent farm breaking up his ranch. He seemed civil enough. Said he'd make sure your cattle had water and keep an eye out for trouble. I'm sure he would. The sooner I fail, the sooner he can make an offer to the bank. She sighed. But I suppose we don't have much choice. We don't, Quentin agreed. Packlight will camp on the trail. The journey to San Antonio proved more arduous than Olivia had anticipated. Spring rains had made the roads muddy and difficult, and by the second night, they were behind schedule. We'll have to push harder tomorrow, Quentin said as they sat by their small campfire. If we miss the auction, this whole plan falls apart. Olivia nodded tiredly. The past 2 days of hard riding had left her sore and exhausted, but she wouldn't complain. Too much depended on their success. Tell me something, Mr. Tucker, she said after a while, watching him across the dancing flames. Where did you learn so much about horses and cattle? My father raised horses in Kentucky. Some of my earliest memories are of the stables. A hint of warmth entered his voice. He had a way with them, could gentle the wildest stallion with just his voice and touch. And he taught you, some. The rest I learned through the years, working ranches, driving cattle. He stoked the fire. What about you? How did a woman who was clearly raised to be a lady end up farming in Texas? Olivia smiled at his perception. I was supposed to marry a banker in Philadelphia. My parents had it all arranged. What happened? I met Robert at a social. He was visiting relatives and had all these grand stories about the West, freedom, opportunity, land of our own. She shook her head at the memory. I was young and sheltered and completely swept away. We eloped 2 weeks later. That took courage, or foolishness, she countered. My parents disowned me. We came west with barely enough money for a wagon and supplies. Those first years were. She trailed off, remembering the hardships, the hunger, the bitter winters and scorching summers. "You regret it?" Quentin asked quietly. The question gave her pause. She'd asked herself the same thing many times over the years, especially in the dark days after Robert's death. "No," she finally said. "It was harder than anything I could have imagined, but it was real. Every triumph was ours. Every decision was ours. I never would have known what I was capable of if I'd stayed in Philadelphia." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Freedom has a price." "Yes," she studied him in the firelight. "Is that why you're drifting for freedom?" A complexity of emotions crossed his face. "Partly. And partly because staying in one place too long can be dangerous for a man with my history." "And what history is that, Mr. Tucker?" she asked softly. For a moment she thought he might actually answer. Then he stood, effectively ending the conversation. "We should get some rest. Dawn comes early, and we have hard riding ahead." They reached San Antonio late the following evening, too late to register for the auction. Quentin found them modest but respectable lodgings, separate rooms, of course, and they rose early the next day to secure their place in the sale. The auction house was crowded with buyers and sellers, the air thick with tobacco smoke and the scent of leather and horses. Olivia felt conspicuous as one of the few women present, but Quentin's steady presence beside her kept unwanted attention at bay. "Your stallion is lot 23, the clerk informed them after examining both horses. "The chestnut is 37. Bidding starts at 9. They spent the morning watching the proceedings, evaluating the quality of the other horses and the mood of the buyers. When Eclipse was led into the ring, Olivia felt a pang of guilt. The magnificent bay pranced nervously, clearly searching for Quentin among the unfamiliar faces. "He'll go to a good home," Quentin murmured, as if reading her thoughts. "With bloodlines like his, he'll be valued." Bidding was spirited, and when the gavel fell at $170, 20 more than they'd hoped, Olivia impulsively squeezed Quentin's hand. He didn't pull away, and for a brief moment, the shared triumph overshadowed the loss of his faithful companion. The chestnut stallion brought $110, bringing their total to $280, more than enough to pay off the bank and have a small reserve for emergencies. "We did it," Olivia breathed as they left the auction house, the money securely tucked into an inner pocket of her dress. "I can hardly believe it." "Belief comes easier with cash in hand," Quentin replied with a rare smile. "We should celebrate, dinner at a proper restaurant tonight." The suggestion surprised her. It was the first time he'd proposed anything beyond the necessary tasks of saving her farm. "I'd like that." San Antonio's better establishments were a far cry from the simple fare she'd grown accustomed to in Tascosa. Seated across from Quentin in a corner table of a respectable restaurant, Olivia was suddenly conscious of her travel-worn dress and wind-blown hair. "I'm hardly presentable for a place like this," she murmured. "Nonsense." His eyes met hers with unexpected warmth. "You look fine." The compliment, simple as it was, brought color to her cheeks. They ordered steaks and potatoes, and for the first time in months, perhaps years, Olivia felt the weight of constant worry lift from her shoulders. "I've been thinking," Quentin said as they lingered over coffee. "Your farm has potential, but you need a more diverse operation to weather the hard times." "What do you suggest?" "Horses, for one. Not just work animals, but breeding stock. The market for quality horses is growing with the railroads and expanding towns." He outlined a vision of the farm that was both practical and ambitious, a small but selective breeding program that would supplement the cattle operation. "It sounds wonderful," she admitted, "but it would take time and money to establish." "Yes," he agreed. "But with careful planning and hard work, it's achievable." The way he spoke as if he were part of this future he described stirred something in her she'd thought long buried. Hope, yes, but something else too. Something warmer and more personal that had nothing to do with the farm's prospects. "Mr. Tucker," she began cautiously, "when we return to Tascosa, what are your plans?" His expression grew guarded. "I haven't decided yet." "You could stay," she offered, her heart suddenly pounding. "Not just in the barn room, as a partner in the farm. We could work it together." The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to voice. Quentin's eyes searched hers, and for a moment she glimpsed vulnerability beneath his composed exterior. "That's a generous offer, Mrs. Fletcher." "Olivia," she corrected softly. "After all we've been through, I think you can call me Olivia." "Olivia." He tested the name, and the sound of it on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" He glanced around the restaurant, then leaned closer, his voice dropping. "There are things about me you don't know, things that might change your mind if you did." "Then tell me," she challenged. "Whatever it is, I doubt it's worse than losing everything I've worked for." For a long moment he seemed to war with himself. Finally he sighed. "Not here." "When we're back on the trail tomorrow." The ride back to Tascosa was slower than their journey to San Antonio, both because they were no longer racing against time and because the atmosphere between them had shifted. A tension had developed, not unpleasant, but charged with unspoken possibilities. They made camp the first night near a small creek, and after they'd eaten the simple meal of beans and bacon, Quentin finally broke his silence. "I was a lawman," he began, staring into the fire. "Deputy U.S. Marshal out of Fort Smith, Arkansas, under Judge Parker." Olivia's eyes widened. "Hanging Judge Parker," Quentin nodded grimly. "The same. For 6 years I tracked outlaws through the Indian territories. It was brutal work, dangerous, thankless. I saw things." He shook his head. "Things I still see in my dreams." "What happened?" she prompted when he fell silent. "There was a gang, the Blackwell brothers. They'd murdered 3 settlers near Tulsa. I tracked them for weeks, finally cornered them in a cabin." His face hardened at the memory. "It was supposed to be a clean arrest. I had 2 deputies with me, but someone tipped them off. They were waiting for us." The pain in his voice was raw, even after what must have been years. "My deputies died in the first volley. I took a bullet in the shoulder but managed to get behind cover." His hand unconsciously moved to his left shoulder. "I killed 2 of the brothers. The third escaped." "And that's why you left the marshals?" "No." His eyes met hers, haunted by memory. "I left because when I got back to Fort Smith, I discovered that the man who'd tipped them off was another marshal, someone I'd considered a friend. He was on their payroll, had been for years." "Did you report him?" A bitter smile touched his lips. "I tried, but he had connections, powerful ones. Instead, I found myself under suspicion. There were irregularities in the shooting, questions about whether the Blackwells had really fired first." "That's absurd." "Politics and law enforcement make for a dangerous mix, Olivia." He stoked the fire. "I resigned before they could build a case against me. But the remaining Blackwell brother, James, he swore vengeance, said he'd hunt me to the ends of the earth." Understanding dawned. "That's why you keep moving." "Yes." He met her gaze directly. "And that's why I can't stay in one place too long, can't form attachments, can't put down roots. Can't become a partner in a small farm outside Tascosa," she finished for him. "It would be irresponsible of me," he agreed softly. "If James Blackwell ever tracked me there. So you'll just keep running forever?" There was a challenge in her voice. "That's not living, Quentin, that's just existing." The use of his first name didn't escape his notice. "It's surviving, and ensuring others survive too." They fell into silence, the crackling fire the only sound between them. Finally, Olivia spoke again. "When did this happen?" With the Blackwells, 3 years ago. And in those 3 years, has James Blackwell ever come close to finding you? Quentin considered the question. No, I don't think so. But then perhaps he's given up, or died, or been arrested himself. She leaned forward. You can't live your life in fear of what might happen. It's not fear, he countered. It's caution. Call it what you will. But ask yourself this. When does caution become an excuse? The question hung between them, unanswerable. Eventually, they banked the fire and retired to their separate bedrolls, but Olivia knew from Quentin's restless movements that her words had struck deeper than he wanted to admit. They reached Tascosa 2 days later, riding straight to the bank where Tom Matthews received them with poorly disguised disappointment. $200, as agreed, Olivia said, counting out the money on his desk with satisfaction. The loan is now paid in full. Matthews verified the amount, then reluctantly prepared a receipt. Very well, Mrs. Fletcher, your note is cleared. He eyed them both. I must say I'm surprised. Most widows in your situation would have accepted the inevitable. I'm not most widows, Olivia replied with a smile. And I don't believe in inevitable when it comes to losing what's rightfully mine. Outside the bank, Olivia felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. I can hardly believe it, she said as they mounted their horses. The farm is secure. You did well, Quentin said, genuine pride in his voice. Not many would have fought so hard. We did well, she corrected. I couldn't have done it without you. The ride back to the farm was quiet, both of them aware that they'd reached a crossroads. Quentin had revealed his past and his reasons for not staying. Olivia had made her case for why he should. Neither had changed the other's mind, but something had changed between them, a deeper understanding, a reluctant recognition of feelings that had grown despite their best intentions. Joseph Miller was waiting for them when they arrived, seated on his horse near the main gate. He straightened as they approached, his weathered face unreadable. Mrs. Fletcher, Tucker. He nodded to each of them. Farm still standing, I see. Thank you for keeping an eye on things, Mr. Miller, Olivia said politely. Least I could do for a neighbor. His eyes shifted to Quentin. Heard you two made quite a splash at the San Antonio auction. Good prices for both horses. Quentin's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. News travels fast. Small communities, Miller shrugged. Always someone who knows someone who was there. He adjusted his hat. Well, I won't keep you, just wanted to make sure you got back safe. He turned his horse to leave, then paused. Oh, and Tucker. Had a stranger asking about you in town yesterday. Said he was an old friend from Arkansas. The blood drained from Quentin's face. What did he look like? Tall fella. Dark beard. Had a scar running from his eye down to his jaw. Miller's gaze sharpened. Seemed mighty interested in finding you. Did you tell him where I was? Told him I didn't know any Quentin Tucker. Miller's expression remained neutral. Man like that asking questions generally isn't bringing good news. Thank you, Quentin said quietly. Miller nodded once more to Olivia, then rode away. An ominous silence fell between them as the implications of his news sank in. James Blackwell, Olivia whispered. Sounds like him. Quentin's voice was tight. He must have been at the auction or heard about it. What will you do? His jaw clenched. I'll leave tonight. If he's looking for me here, I need to draw him away from Tascosa. Away from you. No. The force of her own response surprised her. You can't just run again. I don't have a choice, Olivia. This man is dangerous, more dangerous than you can imagine. Then we'll face him together, she insisted. This is my home, and I'm tired of threats against it, whether from bankers or outlaws. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment you helped save my farm, she countered. And I won't let you face it alone. The determination in her voice gave him pause. He studied her face, the strength in her blue eyes, the set of her jaw, and something shifted in his expression. "I can't ask you to put yourself at risk for me. You didn't ask." She moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. "I'm offering. We'll work it together, Quentin. The farm and whatever else comes our way." The touch of her hand seemed to breach the last of his defenses. With a movement that surprised them both, he pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke of longing and fear and hope all mingled together. When they finally separated, breathless and shaken by the intensity of the moment, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I've been fighting this since the day I rode onto your land," he admitted softly. "Fighting what? The way you make me feel, the way you make me want to stop running and start living again." A smile touched her lips. "Then stop fighting." But the shadow of threat still loomed. That evening, as darkness fell, they prepared for the possibility of Blackwell's arrival. Quentin checked and cleaned his revolver, then positioned himself by the window where he could watch the approach to the farmhouse. "He won't come tonight," he predicted. "He'll want to scout the place first, get the lay of the land. Tomorrow, maybe, or the next day." "How can you be so sure?" "Because it's what I would do." His eyes met hers across the room. "I was good at my job, Olivia. I know how men like Blackwell think. And what will you do when he comes?" "Try to reason with him first," Quentin said, though his tone suggested he held little hope for that outcome. "Offer to surrender myself to the proper authorities if he has legitimate grievances. And if he won't listen to reason," the grim set of his mouth was answer enough. The night passed without incident, but the tension remained. Quentin insisted they continue with normal farm activities, no sense broadcasting that we're expecting trouble while maintaining vigilance. He taught Olivia how to use the shotgun more effectively and established signals they could use to alert each other to danger. It was on the second day after their return that Joseph Miller rode up again, this time with urgency in his manner. "Blackwell's in town," he reported without preamble. "Got drunk at the saloon last night, started asking more pointed questions. Mentioned something about settling scores." "He say when he's coming out this way?" Quentin asked. Miller shook his head. "But the way he was drinking, I'd guess not today. Tomorrow more likely." "Why are you helping us, Mr. Miller?" Olivia asked bluntly. "You've made no secret of wanting this land." The older man looked offended. "Wanting to expand my ranch is business, Mrs. Fletcher. Letting an outlaw threaten a neighbor is something else entirely." He straightened in the saddle. "Besides, the sheriff's out of town till Friday. Someone's got to keep an eye on things." After Miller left, Quentin made a decision. "We need to draw him away from the farm. I'll ride into town, let him see me there." "And then what? Have a shootout in the middle of Tascosa?" Olivia shook her head. "The moment he sees you, he'll either attack or follow you back here. Either way, someone could get hurt." "I don't see a better option." Frustration edged his voice. "I can't just wait for him to come to us." "Actually," Olivia said slowly, "an idea forming. Maybe we can use that to our advantage." The plan they developed was risky, but offered their best chance of resolving the situation without bloodshed. If Blackwell was indeed coming to the farm, they would be prepared for him in ways he wouldn't expect. Dawn broke clear and cool the next morning. Quentin positioned himself in the barn loft with a clear view of the approach to the farm, while Olivia went about her normal chores in the yard, apparently alone and vulnerable. The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Mid-morning came and went without sign of their expected visitor. By noon, they were beginning to wonder if Miller's information had been wrong. Then, just as the sun reached its zenith, a rider appeared on the horizon. He approached slowly, deliberately, making no attempt to conceal his presence. From his vantage point, Quentin observed through field glasses. "It's him," he confirmed in a low voice that carried to Olivia below. Scarred face, just like Miller said. Olivia's heart pounded, but she forced herself to continue hanging laundry as if unaware of the approaching danger. When the rider was within 50 yards, she finally looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun. "Can I help you?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The man reined his horse to a stop. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a dark beard and the vivid scar Miller had described running down the left side of his face. A revolver hung at his hip, and his eyes were cold as they assessed her. "Looking for a man named Quentin Tucker," he said without preamble. "Heard he might be staying here." Olivia had rehearsed this moment in her mind. "Mr. Tucker's gone into town," she replied. "Should be back before sundown if you'd like to wait." Blackwell's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "That's so." He glanced around the property. "You'd be Mrs. Fletcher, I take it." "I would." She kept her hands visible away from the pocket of her apron where she'd concealed a small derringer. "And you are an old acquaintance of Tucker's." A humorless smile twisted his scarred face. "We have unfinished business." "I gathered as much." She nodded toward the house. "It's hot out here. Would you care for some water while you wait?" The invitation clearly surprised him. He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether this was a trap. Finally, he dismounted, though he kept one hand near his weapon. "That's mighty hospitable of you, madam." "It's common courtesy," she corrected, leading the way to the porch. "Please have a seat. I'll fetch that water." Inside the house, Olivia moved to the window that would give Quentin the signal they'd arranged. She adjusted the curtain slightly all clear so far, then filled a glass with water from the pitcher. When she returned to the porch, Blackwell was seated in one of the wooden chairs, his posture tense despite his apparent ease. "Here you are," she said, handing him the glass. He accepted it with a nod. "You and Tucker close." The directness of the question caught her off guard, but she maintained her composure. "Mr. Tucker has been helping around the farm. Beyond that, I don't see how it's any of your business." A flash of anger crossed his face, quickly controlled. "Fair enough." He drank deeply, then set the glass down. "He tell you why I'm looking for him? He mentioned you might blame him for your brother's deaths." "Blame him?" Blackwell's voice hardened. "He gunned them down in cold blood, shoddily in the back while he was surrendering." The accusation hung in the air between them. Olivia knew Quentin's version of events, but she kept her expression neutral. "Is that what happened?" "It's the God's honest truth." Blackwell leaned forward. Tucker was known for being trigger-happy. Wanted the glory of bringing in the Blackwell brothers, dead or alive. His eyes darkened with genuine grief. Illy was just 22, had a young wife expecting their first child. The humanity in his pain gave Olivia pause. What if Quentin's version wasn't the whole truth? What if this man's grievance was legitimate? "If what you're saying is true," she said carefully, "why not bring charges through proper channels? Why track him across half the country?" "You think I didn't try?" Bitterness laced his words. "Went to Judge Parker himself." But Tucker had friends in the right places. "The official report said my brothers opened fire first, that it was self-defense." He shook his head. "Two dead deputies made for a convenient story." Olivia's mind raced. Could Quentin have lied to her? The doubt must have shown on her face because Blackwell pressed his advantage. "I don't want to hurt you, Mrs. Fletcher. My quarrel's with Tucker. Just tell me where he really is and I'll be on my way." Before she could respond, a floorboard creaked behind her. Blackwell's hand flew to his gun but froze as Quentin's voice rang out. "She told you the truth, James. I was in town." He stepped onto the porch, his own weapon drawn but pointed at the ground. "Just got back a different way than you came." Blackwell's eyes burned with hatred. "Tucker." "It's been a long time, James." Quentin's voice was calm, but Olivia could see the tension in his stance. 3 years of chasing shadows. 3 years of living with what you did to my family. Blackwell's hand remained on his gun, but he made no move to draw. You going to shoot me like you shot Ellie, unarmed? Your brother wasn't unarmed, and you know it. Quentin's gaze was steady. He had a Derringer hidden in his boot, pulled it on Deputy Williams before I could warn him. Lies, Blackwell spat. Always more lies. Think what you want, but ask yourself this. If I was the kind of man who shoots unarmed suspects, why haven't I shot you yet? Quentin slowly holstered his weapon. I didn't come here to kill you, James. I came to end this. The gesture caught Blackwell off guard. His hand wavered over his revolver. End it how? By offering you a choice. Quentin moved to stand beside Olivia. You can draw that gun and one or both of us will die right here on this porch. Or you can listen to what I have to say and maybe, just maybe, we both walk away from this. For a tense moment, it could have gone either way. Then, slowly, Blackwell moved his hand away from his weapon. Talk then, but make it quick. I've got proof that Ellie fired first, Quentin said. Deputy Williams survived long enough to sign a deposition. I kept a copy all these years. He reached slowly into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded document. Read it. Then decide if your vengeance is worth dying for. Blackwell accepted the paper with suspicious eyes, unfolding it carefully. As he read, his expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to something approaching doubt. This could be forged, he finally said, but there was less conviction in his voice. It could be, Quentin agreed. But is it? Look me in the eye, James. You knew me before all this. Was I ever the kind of lawman who'd shoot an unarmed man? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Blackwell's gaze lifted from the paper to Quentin's face, searching for deceit. I want to believe you're lying, he said at last. It's easier than thinking Ellie would be so foolish. He was trying to protect you, Quentin said quietly. He knew you'd gotten away, thought if he could buy you time. Blackwell's shoulders sagged slightly. Sounds like Ellie. He refolded the document, handed it back to Quentin. So what now? You expect me to just ride away, pretend the last 3 years never happened? No, Quentin replied. I expect you to make a choice about the next 3 years, and the 3 after that. He glanced at Olivia, drawing strength from her presence. I'm done running, James. This is where I'm making my stand one way or another. Something in his tone, finality perhaps, or simple truth, seemed to reach Blackwell. He looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. You and her, he said. This isn't just about the farm, no, Quentin admitted. It's not. Blackwell was silent for a long moment. Then, with deliberate slowness, he unbuckled his gun belt and laid it on the porch railing. I've been chasing you so long, I don't rightly know what else to do with myself, he said, a hint of bleak humor in his voice. Never thought about what would happen if I actually found you. Start over, Olivia suggested, speaking for the first time since Quentin had appeared. Somewhere new. Be someone other than James Blackwell, outlaw. He looked at her with surprise, then something like respect. Just like that. It won't be easy, Quentin said, but it's possible. I know something about reinventing yourself. Blackwell's laugh was short and without mirth. I bet you do. He stood, retrieving his gun belt but not buckling it back on. I can't promise I'll never come looking for you again, Tucker. But not today. Fair enough. Quentin extended his hand. Safe travels, James. After a moment's hesitation, Blackwell took the offered hand in a brief, firm grip. Then he turned to Olivia. Madam. With a tip of his hat, he descended the porch steps and mounted his horse. They watched in silence as he rode away, the tension that had gripped them slowly easing as his figure grew smaller on the horizon. Do you think he'll be back? Olivia finally asked. Quentin slipped an arm around her waist, drawing her close. Maybe, but not with murder in his heart. A man knows when it's time to let go of the past. Is that what you're doing? Letting go of the past? He turned to face her fully, his eyes filled with an emotion that made her breath catch. I'm embracing the future, if you'll have me, as a partner in the farm. She asked, though she knew that wasn't what he meant. A smile touched his lips. As whatever you'll allow me to be in your life, Olivia Fletcher. And if I want more than just a business partner, his hands framed her face with gentle reverence, then I'd say we're of the same mind. This time when they kissed, there was no shadow of threat hanging over them, no uncertainty about tomorrow. There was only the promise of what they could build together on the land and in their hearts. The following months brought changes to the Fletcher farm. With the bank loan cleared and Quentin's expertise in horses, they began implementing the breeding program they'd discussed. They started small two-quality mares purchased from a rancher near Austin who was liquidating his stock, but the foundation was promising. Quentin proved to be as skilled in business as he was in farming. He established connections with buyers from as far away as Kansas City, negotiated favorable terms with suppliers, and introduced innovative practices that increased their cattle herd's productivity. By autumn, the farm was showing a modest profit for the first time in years. Their personal relationship deepened alongside the business one. Quentin moved from the barn room to the farmhouse, though propriety was maintained with separate bedrooms until the day Joseph Miller, of all people, suggested they make things official before the whole town starts gossiping. They were married in October, a small ceremony in Tascosa's modest church with Miller as witness. Olivia wore a new blue dress she'd ordered from a catalog, and Quentin surprised her with a delicate gold band that had belonged to his mother. "I've been carrying it for years," he admitted as he slipped it onto her finger. "Waiting for the right time, the right woman." "And am I?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. "The right woman?" His answer was in his eyes. In the tender way he kissed her before the minister pronounced them husband and wife, in the gentle strength of his hands as he lifted her over the threshold of what was now truly their home. Life settled into a rhythm that was both challenging and deeply satisfying. There were hard times, drought in the summer of '86, a harsh winter that claimed some of their weaker cattle, occasional whispers about Quentin's past that followed them into town. But there were triumphs, too. Their first foal from the new breeding program fetched twice what they'd expected at auction. The cattle herd grew healthier and more valuable under their joint management. The farmhouse expanded with a new wing to accommodate their growing needs. And in the spring of 1887, their family expanded too, with the birth of their son, Robert Quentin Tucker, named for the man who had begun the farm and the man who had saved it. "He has your eyes," Quentin whispered in wonder as he held his newborn son for the first time. "And hopefully your temperament. One stubborn Tucker in the family is enough." Olivia laughed, exhausted but radiant. "He'll need that stubbornness. This land doesn't give its bounty easily." "No," Quentin agreed, settling beside her on the bed, their child cradled between them. "But the rewards are worth the struggle." As twilight deepened into night outside their window, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the brink of losing everything to building something stronger and more valuable than she could have imagined. From the loneliness of widowhood to the rich partnership of a marriage based on mutual respect and deepening love. "What are you thinking?" Quentin asked, his voice soft in the dimly lit room. "I'm thinking about that day you rode up to my broken fence," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "How close I came to sending you away." "You nearly did," he reminded her with a smile. "If I hadn't been so persistent. If you hadn't been so desperately needed," she corrected. "The farm was falling apart around me. And now," his free arm tightened around her shoulders, "What do you need now, Olivia Tucker?" She looked down at their sleeping son, then up at the man who had transformed her life with his courage, his skills, and his heart. "Just this," she whispered. "Just us, working together, building something that will last." Quentin's kiss was a promise of partnership, of passion, of a future neither could have imagined when fate first brought them together on a struggling farm outside Tascosa. "We'll work it together," he murmured against her lips, echoing the words that had become their shared promise. Always. In the years that followed, the Tucker farm became one of the most respected small operations in the Panhandle. Their horse breeding program gained regional recognition, and their methods for sustainable cattle ranching were adopted by other small farmers fighting to maintain independence from the large corporate ranches that increasingly dominated the landscape. They welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth Rose, in 1889, and another son, Samuel, in 1892. The children grew up strong and capable, learning the business of the farm alongside their lessons in reading and arithmetic. Young Robert showed his father's affinity for horses, while Elizabeth inherited her mother's head for figures and business, and Samuel developed a talent for innovations that improved their agricultural yields. Quentin's past occasionally resurfaces, a former colleague passing through, a newspaper article about Judge Parker's retirement, but the shadow of James Blackwell never darkened their door again. They heard, through roundabout channels, that he had indeed started over, taking work as a ranch foreman in Montana under a different name. As Tascosa grew, changing from frontier outpost to established community, the Tuckers became respected members of local society. Olivia helped establish the town's first proper school, while Quentin served on committees that brought irrigation improvements to area farms and better roads connecting to the railroad. In 1900, as the new century dawned, they celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary by adding a proper front porch to the farmhouse, wide and welcoming, with comfortable chairs where they could sit in the evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had nurtured together. "Did you ever imagine this?" Olivia asked one such evening, her hand clasped in his as they rocked gently side by side. "When you were riding from town to town, running from the past," Quentin's smile was reflective. "Never. I couldn't see past the next horizon." He squeezed her hand. "You gave me a future, Olivia, you and this land." "We gave it to each other," she corrected. "The day you told me we'll work it together, you changed everything." Around them, the farm lay peaceful in the gathering dusk, fields neat and productive, barns solid and well-maintained, cattle grazing contentedly in the distance. The sounds of their children's laughter drifted from inside the house, a sweet counterpoint to the gentle creaking of their rocking chairs. "No regrets?" he asked, a question he still posed from time to time, as if marveling at his good fortune. Olivia's answer was always the same, spoken with the certainty of a woman who had faced hardship, embraced love, and built a life of purpose and joy. "Not a single one."